One of the things that I frequently get asked is how to use DataHub WebView to run a slideshow. So running through a series of pages on some interval, perhaps because the computer's running in a kiosk type environment, maybe at a trade show, and I just want to display different pages on some regular interval. So I've decided to put together this video blog to show you how you can build slideshow functionality using script, and I'm going to do this entirely from scratch. If you don't have a background in script, you might find some of this a little bit confusing, but hopefully I'll try to make it as clear as possible. So let me start by navigating to the directory, the install directory that contains our scripts. And you can see that right now there are a few files that are already installed by default in the scripts Cogent folder. And I'm going to just arbitrarily create a new folder called My Scripts. And in that folder, I'm going to create a new file. And I'm going to call that file slideshow.ss. Files that contain server-side script have to end in SS, or if you will, S# to indicate that those files should be loaded into WebView at runtime when it starts up. Just like pages need to end in a .xml extension, the server-side scripts have to end in a .ss. So let me just open that up in Notepad, and that's the tool that I'm going to use to edit my script. Well, there's a few different things that I need to do, and the first thing is I really want to be able to keep track of the list of pages that are going to be tracked or loaded, if you will, to manage the slideshow. So let me just add a comment there, and I'm going to define a variable list slideshow pages, and I'll just initialize that to null for the time being. And the next thing I want to do is create a function that's actually going to start the slideshow. So start slideshow. And if we think about the functional arguments that are going to be passed to this, we clearly are going to need a list of pages, and we probably will want to know what kind of interval we're dealing with, number of seconds per page. So I'm going to define both of those arguments as being expected when we call our slideshow. Well, the pages argument should be a list of string arguments, and the way that we're going to define those in S# is like that. And so in essence, what I want to do is capture the pages argument that's being passed in and assign it to my global variable here that I have identified up above. And the reason I'm defining it here is because I'm going to need access to that list of pages in a few different functions within this script. Another thing that I probably want to do is to create some kind of a WebView variable that's going to be used to track the index of the page that needs to be displayed. And so I'm going to use my set functionality, which is of course a DataHub WebView script function that we've talked about several times, and I'll just define that as slideshow index, and for the time being we're going to indicate that it's -1. The list of pages really will go from 0 up to whatever, and so as we cycle through our slideshow, we'll probably actually start at 0. And in fact, that makes me think, you know what, maybe what I should do before anything else is let's just think about how we're going to test this. So we don't have any code in there right now to create a timer or some other interval, but what I should at a minimum be able to do is to set my slideshow index equal to 0, and then I should be able to make some kind of a call, open next slideshow page. So there we go. So we've got a starter function that we're going to call when we want to start a slideshow. It's going to expect both a list of pages as well as what our interval is. We're going to capture that list of pages. Ultimately, we'll come back and initialize that to 1, but just for testing purposes right now, we're going to set our index to 0, and we're going to make a call to open the next slideshow page. So that allows me now to define the next function, which is in fact open next slideshow page, just as we would expect, because that's the function that we are calling. So in essence, this guy will call that guy. Now ultimately, those lines will be removed, but just for testing purposes, we'll start there. Well, first thing that I'm going to need to do is figure out what the page index is that I want to access. And of course, I have already created a variable, slideshow index, which corresponds, of course, to that guy. So at this point, the slideshow index should pull back the 0. And all I really want to do is say, well, okay, let's use the execute command function, which is a WV function. And of course, the command that we want to execute is open page. And the page that we want to open is going to come from this global variable here, list of slideshow pages. So let's just put that down there, and we'll index into that list using the index that is relevant for the slideshow, which of course is going to initialize to 0. Well, just to add a little bit of code here to make sure that open next slideshow page is going to return and use an index that's relevant, let me just make sure that I only do this execute command when the list of slideshow pages is not equal to null, and when the index is greater than or equal to 0, and when the index is actually less than the number of pages in my slideshow pages, so .count. So, that way if I only have 3 pages in my list, but my counter gets up for whatever reason to say number 5, it's not going to attempt to index into this list beyond the number of items in here. And the reason that this is less than, of course, is because we're dealing with a 0-based list. So if I had 3 items in this list, then I really want to be able to index from 0, 1, or 2. So if I've got that in there correctly, let me just do a eyeball check to make sure that it looks right. Seems to so far, so that's good. So at this point, I should be able to save that page, and when I now start WebView, so let's go back and do that, I'll log in as the administrator user ID. And if these functions have been correctly defined, nothing of course is going to happen at this point because we've never made a call to start the slideshow, but at a minimum I should be able to confirm that there is the script that I just created, my scripts slideshow.ss, and there are the functions that I've just defined. And so if this is in fact working, I probably, let's just try this, I should be able to add a button to my screen. And this is a temporary test, so I'm not going to worry about naming the button or testing it. But what I do want to do is basically make a call. I'll move down here a little bit. Something like this, start slideshow, passing in, of course, 2 arguments, pages, which I have not yet defined, and some interval, which I'll arbitrarily set as 10 seconds. Well, we haven't defined, of course, this pages variable yet, so let's do that. Var pages is going to be equal to a new list of strings, and I want to be able to add a few different pages to this list. So I want to add Cogent demo 3. And these pages, of course, are coming directly from here, the Cogent directory. So there, for example, is demo page 3. Let me just go back and continue to work on this. And I'll arbitrarily add a couple other pages. Let's also add 4 and 9. So we've defined our list of strings. We have noticed that the first page we're requesting is demo 3. And start our slideshow, and so I'm going to hit apply on that and now of course I haven't saved this page yet. So when we actually attempt to navigate away from the page, we're going to notice that nothing happened. And so obviously I have a little bit of a problem with the code that I have created. That's the beauty of live demos. So let me just think about this for a second. What have I done wrong? List of slides. Oh, okay. So here's a bit of a problem, something that I have done wrong. And this is part of the nuance of the S# language. You'll notice that right now we've defined our global variable of list slideshow pages, and we're trying to use that in a few different places. Well, functions within S# that are attempting to access global variables actually need to be told to access those global variables as opposed to defining new local variables. So what I really want to do here is indicate that this variable is global. So this one needs to be the same as that. And I want to do the same thing on both of those functions. So let me just come down and do that, and I'll hit save. And just so that I don't have to redo this work, let me just temporarily save this one here somewhere. So this is going to be some kind of a slideshow test button, I'll call it, and I'll hit OK on that. And the reason I have to save that, of course, is because I'm going to have to refresh DataHub WebView so that the updates to that slideshow SS file are going to come through. And let's just check to make sure that they did. Slideshow SS now has the global and the global, so hopefully this is working. Go back to pages, and let me just navigate down to that slideshow test button and go into run mode, and this time I click my button and still nothing happens. So clearly I've got a little bit of a problem with my script. Let me just have a look at this for a second. Functions, well, there's a problem right there. I've started a comment block and I have neglected to end that comment block, so of course list of slideshow pages would never have been saved correctly. So let me just make a change there, hit save, and let's try this one more time. Log in. Load the slideshow test button, go into run mode, and this time, there we go, it works. So loading demo 3, perfect. So this is working correctly. So just as a quick reminder, what we've done is we've created a base start slideshow function, and obviously open next page is working. Now again, admittedly, it's just opening the first page, but that's absolutely okay with what we wanted. So let me just go to the next step here. Well, clearly we do not want to start the slideshow as I've done here by creating this temporary page slideshow test button. What I want to be able to do is perhaps start the slideshow based on some user ID. So rather than admin, maybe we log on with a different user account, and that's what actually creates the slideshow. So what I'm going to do here is come back to our scripts file, and in addition to slideshow.ss, I'm going to create a second file, and this one is going to be called start slideshow.ss, and this one is going to use one of the application events to define the function that I want. So function application user changed, and username is passed into this function. Well, this application event is something that is very commonly used if I want to execute script whenever the user logs in, and obviously when the user has changed. So in this case, all I want to do is compare the username, and I'm going to do that by first converting to lowercase so I don't have to worry about case sensitivity. And let's say if the user name is equal to slideshow, then I'm going to use that as the key to load that text. So again, I probably should have saved that, but I didn't. Var pages equals new list of strings, and pages dot add Cogent demo 3 4 and 9, and start our slideshow. 15-second interval. And let me save that one. So now when I log in with the slideshow user account, I don't need to specify a default page. I don't need to have anything other than this script to kick off the slideshow. Well, of course, the one thing I do need is that slideshow user ID. So let me just go and create that account. I'm going to jump to Data Hub Properties. I'll go to Security. I'll click Configure Permissions, and let's create a brand new account called Slideshow. And I want to set a password. I'm going to use the password of demo for that. And just in passing here, I'll get you to notice that I'm actually going to use this group membership here called WebView Operator, which gives me a limited set of permissions. Here are the groups, and WebView, Basic Connectivity, WebView, and HTTP User ship with Data Hub when it installs. WebView Operator does not, and I have just created WebView Operator with some very basic permissions. Connect, read, and write for the Data Hub for data points. Does have HTTP Connect capability, and from WebView's perspective, other than Connect, I have the ability to view pages, both mine as well as pages owned by other users, and then also browse for online help and those kinds of things. But I don't have the ability to edit pages. So that definition is actually enough to force this user to run in run mode. They can't even access design mode. So that's good. Let me hit apply and close on that, and I'm done with my security configuration. So now let me minimize that, and those files are there. So let's now log in as slideshow account, and the user and the password is demo. And when I hit enter on that, so you'll see first of all it has started me off in run mode as opposed to design mode, and there we go. There's demo 3 loading up. So that's perfect, absolutely perfect. And I'll just, for the sake of argument, go back to my login screen there, and I'm ready for the next step. Well, of course, the next piece of the puzzle here is to modify slideshow.ss so that instead of forcing it to open the first page, what I want to do is create some kind of a timer mechanism that's going to loop through my slideshow programmatically for me. So to do that, what I want to do is to go back to Start Slideshow, and I'm going to add a call. Oh, I guess we can add it about here. Create and start a timer used to cycle through pages. And I'll remember to put my closing comment in this time. And we're going to do that through 2 different function calls. I'm going to say create, and of course we're going to have to define these functions, but that's okay. Create slideshow timer and start. I'll separate the creation of the timer from the starting or stopping of the timer. So create slideshow timer, and for this one, you know what? I want to be able to indicate how many seconds per page that's going to run. Well, we'll recall that seconds per page was being passed into the start slideshow, so I want to create a timer. There we go. That keeps that runs on that kind of an interval. Okay, so these obviously are just little helper routines to do this. So let me come down here and create those functions. Create slideshow timer, and that's going to expect the number of seconds per page. And I also am going to want two other functions, start slideshow timer. And while I'm doing that, I may as well do a stop slideshow timer. Well, because the timer is going to be accessed in a couple different spots, this is another case of wanting to define a global variable here. So TMR slideshow, the timer for our time show, and again I'm going to initialize that to null. And because again we are accessing this in a few different places, we're going to want to say, well, hey, these functions need that global variable. So I'm going to put that global statement there, there, and there. And when it comes to creating the slideshow, what I want to do is actually use functionality that is available through WebView itself. I'm going to use a WV function to actually create that timer. And the create timer function expects that we indicate the callback routine, the name of the function that will execute whenever the timer fires. Now, we have not created this function yet. We'll do that in a second, but I'm going to call it slideshow timer tick, which means every time the timer ticks, that function will execute. One of the other arguments that we can specify for the timer is basically its lifetime. And I can have timers that have a lifetime of a particular page or a particular element, or in the case of the entire application, I can just pass in null, and so the timer will continue to live as long as WebView is alive. And in this context, because it's a slideshow that's page independent, I want the timer to keep running the entire time. Well, I have not yet specified my interval, so let's do that. The interval that I want to use is a certain number of seconds. Well, I need to specify it by using the time span method. The interval of a timer can be a number of different things: milliseconds, days, hours, minutes, whatever. I want the interval to actually come from the number of seconds, and of course I've already got seconds per page being passed in there as an argument, so I'll use that to create the appropriate time span. So just to recap here, we're calling create slideshow timer. We're passing in the seconds per page that was passed into the start slideshow. That's going to create a timer. The timer is a global variable. We're going to set the interval of the timer to an appropriate time span based on that seconds per page. And to finish off the start and end, let's just get those coded. If the timer is not equal to null, then TMR slideshow dot start, and I'll take that line of code and do something similar down here to stop. So I've now got a few different timer related functions that allow me to create the timer, start the slideshow, and stop the slideshow. And really the only thing that is missing at this point, I'll just give myself a little bit of room here, is that function there. When we create the timer, we have to indicate what the event handler is that will respond to each tick, and I haven't defined that yet. So let's now define that callback function. This is an event handler, and the event handler requires two different arguments. One is the sender, which basically says, why is this function running? This will actually correspond to the timer because it's the one that's raising the tick event, and the event args. We're actually not going to use either of these for this function, but event handlers have to have a particular signature, and so this is relevant for our function declaration. Well, this function, of course, should only execute if the list of slideshow pages is not equal to null. And if it isn't equal to null, well, the first thing that we're going to need to know is what is the index of the slide of the page that we want to open. And of course, we had previously defined our slideshow index to hold that page number. Well, because this tick event is now firing, we clearly do not want to keep opening the same page over and over. So when the timer fires, let's increment that index, and then we'll just make sure that it's still within the appropriate range that we need. So clearly, if for whatever reason the index is ever less than 0, then you know what? Let's just initialize the index back to 0. And similarly, if the index is ever greater than or equal to the list of slideshow pages, meaning the count of that, then let's just reset that again back to 0. So that's what's going to give us our cycle effect, the cyclical nature of it. Once the index reaches the count, the number of pages in there, it's going to go back to 0 again, remembering that this is a zero-based index. And so now that we have retrieved the slideshow index and incremented that, let's just save that back out again to our WebView global variable so that it's available for the next time. And then finally, the last thing we want to do is just make a call to the function that we've already created. Open the next slideshow page. Okay? Which of course means that I should be able to now go back to here. I no longer need this testing logic. All of that can simply disappear because that is replaced by the creation of the timer and starting that timer. So the only thing that we might want to do, now that I think of it, let me just undo that again for a second, because the timer is going to fire every 15 seconds, but we clearly do not want to wait 15 seconds for the very first page to open. So now that I think of it, let's actually change this. We'll leave that as real code. What we want to do is go ahead, start the timer. It's going to kick off every 10 seconds, 15 seconds, whatever we specify. But you know what? Let's at least open the first page now. So we'll set our index to 0, and we'll make a call to our open next slideshow page function. And hopefully I haven't made any mistakes this time. So if this is working, let me just save that. That looks good. That looks good. Good there. And let's see if this works. Log in as slideshow. We should see demo 3 automatically open, and that will be a result of calling the open next slideshow page with the 0, hard coding it. And if this is working correctly, I'm hoping that in another few seconds it will start to load demo page 4. There we go, perfect. Loading demo 4, and then clearly if we wait another 15 seconds it should load demo page 9. And there it goes. Perfect. Loading demo 9. And there's a bunch of trend charts. So this is absolutely working correctly. And there, once again, is all of the code that we're going to need to implement this function. And now that I know that this is working correctly, I think what I'll do is make sure that this slideshow SS file is included as part of our install for version 1.4, so that the only code that you would have to create is this little hook to indicate what the user ID is and what the pages are that you would want in the slideshow, and all of these other helper functions will be automatically included in DataHub WebView 1.4 install.